All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going deep into some fascinating ideas about happiness, like where we come from and what happens after this whole life thing. We're looking at a source that lays out a really unique path to true happiness.
Hmm, interesting.
Yeah, and this path, it involves understanding our spiritual origins and get this, escaping the cycle of birth and death altogether.
Wow, that's a big one.
I know, right? Okay, so right off the bat, our source talks about these two contrasting realms. It calls them Satlok and, get this, the dead world. What do you make of that?
Well, it's all about the contrast, isn't it? Like Satlock is this ocean of happiness, total bliss, eternal, and all that. And then it's put up against our current reality, which it calls, well, you said it, the dead world.
Right, impermanence, suffering, the whole nine yards, and like we're meant for Satlok, this amazing place, but we've gotten stuck here somehow.
Yeah, trapped in this cycle of birth and death.
Exactly. So the big question is, how do we break free? Our source points to these two key things, Tappvanana and Satbhakti. Can you break those down for us?
Sure, Tattvajana is true spiritual knowledge. It's like the key to ending suffering, according to this source. But it's not just knowing facts and figures, right? It's more about, like, a deep understanding of reality.
Uh-huh, like seeing the bigger picture.
Exactly. And then you have Satakti, which is true worship. It's about aligning yourself with the divine.
So it's not just about knowing, it's also about doing. We need both the knowledge and the action to reach this Satlok, right?
That's the message here, yeah. And the source is pretty clear that our actions have consequences. Like those who haven't attained Tattvajana and, maybe haven't been the best, well, they face a pretty rough path, like torment in hell
Oh, wow.
and millions of painful rebirths.
That's intense.
Yeah, but on the flip side, those who've got that Tattvanana and have practiced Satakti, they reach Satlok. They escape the whole cycle.
Wow, that's a huge difference. So attaining this true spiritual knowledge, it's about escaping suffering and reaching bliss. It's a pretty powerful idea. Do you ever think that maybe some of our everyday struggles come from, like, not having this deeper understanding?
Yeah, the source seems to suggest that, like, a lot of our suffering is because we lack this Tattvana. It's like, without truly understanding, we're just stumbling through life, blindfold almost.
Yeah, bumping into things, hurting ourselves, and not really knowing why.
Exactly. But the source, it offers some hope here. It says Tattvanana can actually cancel out bad karma.
Whoa, really? How does that even work?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. The source talks about the nature of the soul. It says the soul is made of, get this, Nor element.
Nor element, what's that?
It's described as, like, part of the supreme God, so it's imperishable. It can't be destroyed.
Okay, so our bodies, those are temporary, but our souls, those are like eternal sparks of the divine.
That's the idea. And it contrasts this with our physical body, which is, well, subject to decay and death and all that.
That's a pretty powerful concept. So how does this all tie back to Tapanana and this idea of overcoming bad karma?
It's not super explicit about the mechanics, but the implication seems to be that when you understand your true nature and when you're practicing true worship, it kind of purifies your soul,
Makes sense.
aligns it with the divine, and helps you break free from that whole karmic cycle.
Interesting. So it's not about avoiding actions altogether, but more about approaching them with the right understanding and intention. Makes you wonder if this Tattvanana could even help us deal with those really tough things, like grief or loss, with more grace, more understanding.
That's an interesting thought. The source is pretty clear that the main purpose of human life is to achieve this salvation, to escape this cycle of birth and death. And it seems to say that Tattvanana is, like, essential for that.
Like a roadmap, a guidebook for this whole crazy journey we call life. So if that's our purpose, where does happiness fit in? Is it something we achieve along the way, or is it like the final destination?
Well, according to the source, true happiness is completely intertwined with achieving liberation. It's not like a fleeting feeling, It's more like a state of being, a state that comes from understanding your true nature and aligning yourself with the divine.
So it's about more than just feeling good. It's about connecting to something much bigger, something eternal and unchanging. But how do we even tap into that? The source talks about finding a Tubdarshi saint to guide us. What exactly does that mean?
A Tubdarshi saint. They're like someone who's got that true spiritual knowledge. They can guide others towards liberation, show them the way, so to speak.
Uh-huh, like a mentor, someone who's already walked the path.
Yeah, exactly. And the source specifically mentions Satrampalji Maharaj as an example.
It's like having a guide in a jungle. Super helpful. But with so many spiritual teachers out there, how do we know who's the real deal?
Right. That's the tough part. The source doesn't give us like a checklist or anything,
Yeah.
but it keeps stressing the importance of seeking true knowledge, using your discernment.
So it's not just about blindly following, but about really engaging with the teachings.
And trusting your gut feeling, too.
That makes a lot of sense. But what if we haven't found that perfect guru yet? Are there things we can do in the meantime to cultivate that inner peace, that spiritual understanding?
Absolutely. The Source actually talks about this obstacle, ambition. And it suggests seeking refuge in complete Saint Rampalji Maharaj to, well, basically help eradicate unnecessary desires.
So it's like our worldly ambitions are holding us back.
Like an anchor, yeah, keeping us from reaching our full potential.
Exactly. So the Source advises us to focus on spiritual growth and seek guidance from a true saint. Wow, this is a lot to take in. We've talked about Satlok, the dead world, the soul, Tatvanana, Satkakti, and the role of a spiritual guide.
And we're just getting started.
I know, right? It all boils down to this: what is true happiness and how do we find it?
Exactly. And while the Source seems to point to a very specific path, it also raises all these bigger questions about our own individual journeys and, well, how we define happiness for ourselves. Yeah, it seems like this Source really sees true happiness as this state of, like, lasting bliss, achieved through spiritual liberation. It's not just about, like, feeling good in the moment. It's about going beyond the limits of, well, this physical existence and connecting with something eternal.
That's deep. It really challenges how we usually think about happiness, Like we often tie it to things we have or things we achieve.
Right, exactly. And this Source actually points that out, like those worldly ambitions, those attachments, they can actually get in the way of liberation.
So it's like those desires are kind of chaining us to this dead world, as the Source calls it, keeping us from experiencing that true happiness of Satlok.
Yeah, exactly. It's saying true liberation means letting go of those desires and, like, really focusing on our spiritual growth. It even suggests seeking refuge in complete Saint Rampalji Maharaj to help get rid of those unnecessary desires.
Okay, so that brings up a question. If getting out of this cycle means letting go of like worldly ambitions, does that mean we got to abandon all our goals? What about our desire to, make a positive impact on the world?
That's a great question. I don't think the Source is saying we need to totally withdraw from the world. It's more about, like, a shift in perspective. Instead of being driven by our ego and ambition, maybe it's about acting from a place of service, compassion, wanting to contribute to something bigger than ourselves.
So it's not about giving up everything, but more about approaching things with a different mindset, one that's not so focused on like outcomes or personal gain.
Exactly. It's all about balance, living in the world but not being consumed by it.
And that's where this whole Tattvanana thing comes in, right? That true spiritual knowledge can help us see things clearly, detach from those worldly desires.
Absolutely. It's like a guiding light, illuminating the path to true happiness, to liberation. Helps us understand that this world is kind of an illusion, and our souls, well, they're eternal.
It all makes so much sense, but the Source doesn't exactly lay out a step-by-step plan to achieve this Tattvanada. So how do we even start? How do we cultivate that kind of understanding?
Well, it keeps emphasizing seeking guidance from a Tattvadarshi saint, like a true spiritual master. It mentions Sant Rampalji Maharaj again, suggesting he's got those qualities.
Right, finding a true mentor, that can make all the difference. But there are so many teachers and gurus out there. How do we know who to trust?
Yeah, it's a tough one. The Source doesn't give us like a checklist or anything, but it does stress the importance of seeking knowledge, using discernment.
So it's not about blindly following, but really doing your research, asking questions.
And trusting your gut feeling, too.
Makes sense. But what if we haven't found that perfect guru yet? Is there anything we can do in the meantime to cultivate those qualities of inner peace, spiritual understanding?
Oh, for sure. There are definitely things we can do. The Source talks about meditation, mindfulness, spending time in nature.
Yeah, those make sense.
They help us connect with that inner stillness, that peace within.
It's like building a foundation for spiritual growth.
Exactly. We need that inner strength to navigate all the challenges and, make choices that lead to true happiness.
And it's important to remember this isn't a solo journey, right? Connecting with others, having those meaningful conversations, offering support, it all helps us grow.
Absolutely. We're all interconnected, all on this journey together. And sometimes just knowing you're not alone is huge.
So true. This whole idea of escaping the cycle of birth and death, it makes me wonder, what does that actually look like? What happens to the soul when it reaches Satlok?
That's a big question, isn't it? And the Source doesn't really go into detail about what that existence is like. It mainly focuses on the path to liberation, the steps to escape suffering and reach that blissful realm.
So it's more about the journey than the destination.
In a way, yeah. The emphasis is on breaking free to the limitations of this world, reaching that state of lasting peace, liberation. The details of what that looks like, well, that's kind of open to interpretation.
It's like we're given a map to this hidden treasure, but we're not told exactly what we'll find when we get there.
I like that analogy. And maybe that's part of the beauty of it all. It lets us use our imaginations to yearn for something beyond what we currently understand.
It definitely makes you curious. If there's no birth or death in Satlock, does that mean time doesn't exist either?
Whoa, that's a mind bender. If there's no cycle of birth and death, would time even be a thing? Like, would linear time, how we experience it here, even make sense there?
I know, right? Our whole lives are structured around time. But what if in Satlock, that whole framework just doesn't apply? What if time is experienced differently, or maybe doesn't exist at all?
It really challenges how we think about reality, doesn't it? The source doesn't give us a straight answer, but it definitely invites us to think about what's possible beyond our limited human understanding.
This whole conversation has been so thought-provoking. We've talked about Satlock, the dead world, the soul's journey, Tatvanama, and Satparti.
We've barely scratched the surface.
I know, right? And while the source points us toward one specific path, it also raises all these bigger questions about happiness, suffering, the meaning of life, everything.
Exactly. It's a lot to ponder, and it really makes you think, what can we actually do in our daily lives to make this shift happen?
How can we integrate these really profound concepts into our everyday routines, our interactions?
Yeah, that's the big question. The source doesn't give us a step-by-step guide, but it keeps telling us to seek knowledge, seek guidance from a true saint. Seems like the journey starts with that inner work.
So it's not just about understanding it all intellectually, but about really embodying it, living it out in our actions.
Exactly, and that's where the real transformation happens, where we bridge the gap between theory and practice.
It's like we've been given these amazing tools, but it's up to us to pick them up and build something beautiful with them.
I love that analogy, and I think that's exactly what this source is encouraging us to do. Take these teachings, these glimpses into a higher reality, and weave them into our lives.
This makes me think about, those who have already passed away. Is there any hope for them to reach Satlock?
That's a really compassionate question. The source doesn't directly address it, but it does talk about the power of Tatvajana and Sapakti. It suggests that those practices can lead to liberation, regardless of our current state.
So even those who have passed on could still benefit from spiritual knowledge and true devotion.
That's definitely one way to look at it. And some spiritual traditions believe that prayers and good deeds of the living can actually help guide departed souls towards a higher state of being.
That's comforting. It's like our actions, our intentions can have a much bigger impact than we realize, even beyond our own lives.
It really speaks to the interconnectedness of everything, the idea that we're all part of this web of consciousness, and our actions affect the whole fabric of existence.
If our actions can have that kind of impact, even after we're gone, it really underscores the importance of living intentionally, compassionately.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder that our choices matter, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. And maybe this journey towards Satlock, towards true happiness and liberation, it's not just about individual salvation. It's about the evolution of consciousness as a whole.
That's a beautiful thought. It shifts the focus from personal gain to a much grander purpose. It makes you wonder if true happiness, escaping this cycle, requires us to change how we see things. What can we actually do to make that happen?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? Like, how do we put all this into practice? The source doesn't exactly give us a to-do list,
Right.
but it definitely emphasizes seeking true knowledge and, making sure our actions reflect that.
So it's more than just reading about it or listening to podcasts. It's about actually living it out. But how do we even start?
Well, the source keeps coming back to this idea of finding a Tapdarshi saint, a true spiritual guide. But even if we haven't found that mentor yet, there are things we can do. Like we can start cultivating those practices that bring us inner peace, compassion.
Things like meditation, mindfulness, spending time in nature.
Exactly. Those are great ways to connect with that inner stillness, that peace inside.
And from that place, from that centeredness, we can start making choices that really reflect our spiritual goals.
Like you're building a strong foundation for your spiritual growth,
Yeah, you need that inner strength to handle all the ups and downs and make choices that lead you toward true happiness.
And it's important to remember this isn't like a solo mission. Connecting with others, having those deep conversations, offering support, it all contributes.
It's like recognizing that we're all connected, we're all on this path together.
Exactly. And sometimes just knowing you're not alone in this, that can make all the difference.
This has been such an inspiring conversation. It's like we've gotten a glimpse behind the curtain, Seen something truly amazing, a world of infinite possibilities and boundless love.
It really has been an incredible exploration. And you know what? This is just the beginning. The real adventure starts when we take these insights and actually integrate them into our lives, transforming our thoughts, our actions, our whole being.
So, as we embark on this journey, let's remember to approach it with curiosity, openness, and a willingness to embrace, well, the unknown.
Beautifully said. And as we navigate this path, let's be kind to ourselves. Celebrate our wins, learn from our stumbles. The journey to Satlock, to true happiness and liberation, it's about being perfect. It's about progress, it's about growth, and it's about believing in our own innate divinity.
A huge thank you to our expert for guiding us through this incredible deep dive. And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us. Remember, the quest for true happiness is a journey, a constant unfolding. Keep those minds open, those hearts ablaze, and those spirits soaring. Until next time, may your path be filled with light, love, and boundless possibilities.